Do you think love at the first Zoom sight exists? Let's find out. One of the exciting opportunities that this strange time provides is to discover new artists, or to check out the work of the artists who were already on my bucket list, but I wasn't able to go to the offline shows for one reason or the other. One of those artists is Siobhan O'Loughlin, most famous around the immersive theater community for her intimate site-specific solo performance, Bone Bathtub. When the tour of her show, Bone Bathtub, was cancelled due to COVID, Siobhan started a series of Zoom performances collectively titled Please Don't Touch the Artist. I saw one of the shows in the beginning of April. It was the early iteration of My Heart Goes Zoom. And I have returned many times since to see other shows of Please Don't Touch the Artist, always finding a much-needed sense of warm embrace. It was at the official press opening of My Heart Goes Zoom in mid-April when it hit me. Please Don't Touch the Artist is not merely a well-made piece of entertainment to pass time during self-isolation. It's a project of historical significance. These performances facilitate true human connection, transcending the limitations of virtual theater and physical distancing. I met with Siobhan to talk about her shows.
Before the COVID and everything, let's just go back in time a little bit. What projects were you working on?
My first immersive project is called Bone Bathtub, and that is a performance in a bathtub for an audience of however many people can fit in someone's actual bathroom in their home. So I've been touring this show for 5 years in over 45, almost 50 cities in 5 different countries and 600 performances. So it's quite a thing. And that piece is about a bike accident I had in New York where I broke my hand and I was borrowing the bathtubs of homes of my friends throughout New York City. And so the experience is sort of a meditation on healing in terms of I'm casting the audience as my actual friends who are helping me with the bath, and I tell them about what I went through. But in this process, I somehow trick them into telling me about them. And so it becomes kind of a group conversation on these themes of social healing from trauma, whether it's physical or emotional, and again, social. I was actually in development process for my new solo immersive project, which is called Lonely Lake Lanier, which I was going to be premiering 8-minute pieces of at the Here Festival, the new immersive design summit in Los Angeles, with my little brother, who is a composer and artist out in LA. And then I was going to be developing the full-length version of Lonely at in Maryland at a residency I had in a library that was going to be paying me for development of this new solo immersive project, none of which happens, will be happening.
How did it feel?
I think oftentimes we can get really insular before we remember, or we have the ability to get that wider perspective, because at first it feels personal and it feels like an attack, and it feels like, oh, this is what happens to me, right? Even though you understand these things are happening to everybody, but then after a week or less, actually, you kind of get your wider perspective grows, and you're like, oh, everyone I'm working with is being super, super diligent in protecting people's lives, which is why we're not gathering for performances. And that is something that I'm so grateful to work with people who canceled early on, being like, we're not going to mess around with this life-threatening situation at hand. So to that end, once that sets in, you're like, yes, my collaborators are good, brilliant people who want to do the right thing. Then you have that perspective for a while, and then you can kind of go back and be like, well, what is my life? So, it's the like zooming out and then like honing back in emotionally. I think that's part of the artistic process right now that is really visceral, I think, for a lot of us.
But how, like, amidst all of this, Please Don't Touch the Artist emerged?
In this understanding of like what was happening, I was like, well, I got to maintain relevancy. It's not that I felt inspired. It's not that I felt, emotionally charged to do something. I just was so worried about falling off because what I do, I perform all the time. Broken Bone Bathtub is a huge part of my life. And transitioning to a new performance project was really exciting for me for this coming year. But it's also how I maintain my relevancy. People always know I'm working because there I am in another city, and there's another there's another feature on me, and these are things that's part of my hustle, and it's part of how people know that I am still in the game. And I hate to talk like that, but that's like the capitalist climate of creativity that we live in. So the fear for me was what made me think like, okay, I'm going to put up a piece on Zoom tomorrow. And I don't know what it's going to be, but I am a journaler. So I was like, whatever, I'll just read them my journal. And I was like, I'm going to post that I'm doing this, but no one's going to come. So they will know that it's happening, which will again maintain the relevancy that I'm trying to do, but but it won't matter because no one will be there. So I posted this thing and 25 people showed up and I was like, oh, why? Why are you here? What am I? And I didn't know what I was doing. And everybody was unmuted. It was chaos. I was managing it myself. And then I was performing from my book. And I mean, it was chaos. But then I got two folks who came to my show who are on my Patreon and are just friends of mine in my life, Denissa Young in South Carolina and Brendan Leahy in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they both wrote to me and they were like, I loved that piece. That was so fun. And Denissa was like, you had to introduce yourself. And like, what if I introduced you? And Brendan was like, hey, if you ever need tech stuff, I got you. That's what I do. And so I was like, I wrote to them both and I said, yes, and you all should meet. And turns out they're both Geminis and they get along very well. And I said, hey, I was sort of kind of committing to sort of putting things up twice a week Broken Bone Bathtub, I perform 10 times a week. I mean, I do 2 shows a night, 5 nights. I mean, it's crazy. Like the amount of, so I was like, I got to do 2 shows a week because 1 week doesn't feel like enough for me and what I do with these, hour-long performances that are simple, right? So the thing about Broken Bone is that it's very simple. I don't have tech. I don't have cues. I don't have, it's me and the people in a very small space together. That's kind of the space I live in. And the new piece was going to be more than that, was going to be experimenting with new things, but that is out the door for now. So they said yes. And then I set myself up to the challenge of, all right, here we go. Let's generate new work. And every time I generate new work and we meet before the Zoom things and we put them up at all kinds of different times of days and nights. And I'm like, all right, if nobody comes, then cool. I got another show in a can and this time will suck, 5 p.m. on a Thursday. That's not a good time. But people keep coming. They keep showing up. And so we're like, okay, I guess, let's do a show.
It sounds like Please Don't Touch the Artist inherited a lot of the Broken Bone Bathtub in a sense that you care for people and you want to hear their stories too. And you open up completely and you just said you read from your journal and it seems incredibly personal and warm and touching and like so open and sincere. And somehow that was you were able to translate it into Zoom space. I wonder how you do it and if it's easy for you to do it at all.
Lots of folks are like, well, just do bathtub remotely. Just do it, on Zoom. Do it. And that piece of performance is just not designed to be like this. But I sort of thought, how can I quickly take the themes of bathtub or the ideology of bathtub in a way and still live in that space, because I think that the warmth and humor that I try to create in that space is actually really the space I want to be in still during this experience of COVID-19, because I think that that there's a lot of there's just so many facets of performance in the immersive world, and for me, having intimate, genuine connections as my genuine self. Of course, I'm performing, but as my genuine self is important to me in my work. And so I knew that when I was putting things up on Zoom, that I still wanted it to be interactive, because I have found that has been the most rewarding work for me, is to create actual relationships with my audience. And I think solo performance explores that, right? The audience is always the scene partner in a solo performance, even if it's not interactive, because the artist is the only one on stage. But immersive solo work is really special because that relationship is really amped up and amplified by the very nature of what kind of interactions you're cultivating. And so I know that that's how I want to do what I do, but I didn't know how that was going to work over this platform. And so we kind of created this structure where I've structured prompts, like, so I write the piece and then I drop in where I want the interactions to be, where I want, and where I want Danissa to then gauge the room. And so at first we were trying to figure out how to gauge the room of like, okay, well, you'll just unmute. So the camera's on means that you're at a higher level of interaction than cameras off. But that meant that she was just kind of unmuting random people. And so then I thought, when I'm in person with people, I can make eye contact and I can see them nodding at me and I can say, oh, this person's with me. And then I can give them a prompt. I'm not making eye contact with literally anyone for the past 10 weeks. So we started working with some Occupy Wall Street language, which is, up twinkles and down twinkles and, mid twinkles. So the idea behind these hand movements in Occupy is like, you can provide someone solidarity without interrupting, right? So you're talking and I'm vibing. And so I'm here like, hell yeah for you. Or if I want you to know that I want you to talk to me and that I'm not vibing with what you're saying, I can do down twinkles. So I thought, hey, maybe I can solicit their vibes by, having them put their hands up when they're with me. And that became a way for facilitating the interactions better. Okay, not only do they have their cameras on, meaning they want to be closer to me, but they're able to kind of like provide me with that, like, actually, yeah, I have a story for that. Or actually, yeah, I really know what you mean. So then when you unmute them, they're not surprised. They know they kind of signed up for it, even though they may not have thought they'd be called on, especially in the case of My Heart Goes Zoom last weekend, which was a very overwhelming 120 people.
Yeah, this is what actually another question I wanted to ask. How did you manage? Because usually you're for the broken bone bathtub, it's like what, up to 10 maybe people or ish, right? Mm-hmm. And for other performances of Please Don't Touch the Artist, it's like up to 30 or around that, at least like those that I attended.
Correct.
And for My Heart Goes Zoom on night 1, you had 130.
I have to tell you. So again, we were like, okay, we don't know how many people are going to come to these things. Every time we're like, again, 5 p.m. on Thursday last week, that's a shitty time. 40 people rocked up to the Zoom room and we're like, okay, we're doing a show. Let's do the show. And so My Heart Goes Zoom, I definitely wanted to, we had some critics show up, and actually our first review dropped today. Mm-hmm. So I was feeling sort of in a slump of like, I'm not really getting much press, and my performance spaces were averaging like 20 people, sometimes 30, but kind of 20-ish. And I was like, I don't know how to get more. I got to get more people. So we did a little bit of restructuring where we've now got all of the shows for the month listed. So everything for June is all on the website currently. And I did some targeted marketing where I sent out some e-blasts to my broken boners, my mailing lists of people in my varying cities who have seen my work and basically saying, hey, this email is actually an offering because these performances are pay what you can. And you don't have to give us anything. And Danissa and Brendan are also they're just incredibly generous human beings who are like, yeah, let's just make a space where people can show up and they can tip and they don't have to. And that's just how we're going to structure it, because we are creators and we've lost work. So we just feel strongly that we want these performances to be offerings. And what that does is that kind of means that, like, okay, 130 people could come because there's no barrier of entry in this space, as you said, between time and space, as well as, financially. But when I thought we would get 50 people. I was like, I want a strong 50 for My Heart Goes Zoom, because that's going to keep the chat going. That's going to keep it really fun and engaging. And as the numbers jumped by in less than a minute, things were jumping by 20, 30, 40. And we were like, we had this panic of like, how will we do this? And then, so then we all right, let's let them in, let's open the room. And then you've got pages and pages of people. And I was just like, I don't know how we're gonna facilitate interaction, with this many human beings. But I don't know how it went for you. There were definitely times where we panicked. And we were like, oh no, because there's so much that happens between the participant, because the participant is also performing for 120, right? Like for this many people. So there's actually a lot that kind of is at stake in a way that at stake, in Broken Bone Bathtub, you're telling 5 people or 10 people some of your personal stories. And here in My Heart Goes Zoom, I'm asking someone to play my Zoom crush in front of more people than they may have done anything in front of in 10 weeks, So
Forever. Because you also read the chat and you comment on the chat a lot during your performance. So it was like twice, if not more, information for you to include in your monologue.
We're constantly trying to understand and explore how to make interaction real, really genuine in this digital space. And definitely the chat has been a tool that I really love, because okay, I like to make jokes. I really thrive off the validation of my people in my room, like laughing at my jokes or, making like, aw kind of sounds or sounds when they agree. And that's the kind of audience member that I am. And you can't do that when you got to mute all 120 people, but you can really encourage a vigorous chat so that you can get people kind of live tweeting the experience and cracking jokes themselves that they're sharing with each other, and giving me LOLs and giving me oh my god and WTF, and sort of sharing, letting me know that they're with me, to the point where I can go to the chat when I want to. I can do chat prompts where I can say, okay, guess what happened next, what do you think? And I can get 25 guesses, or in this case 75 guesses of
But was it fun, or was it like overwhelming to the point that you weren't comfortable with this amount of people?
The only thing that felt uncomfortable was worrying that it was okay for them.
Oh.
I hope that they don't feel, because when you've got a room of 50, you're like, I can kind of holler at all these people and feel like I'm trying to connect with each of them. I cannot make sure I've read every person's comment in the chat when there's 120.
I feel like you did.
Oh, thanks.
It was totally different energy. It was more dynamic, more like,
that chaotic energy, which actually is the experience of a crush. A crush is chaotic good. A crush is, what do I do? And how do I, and so being able to share that with 120 people who I'm really just trying to root for me and get me on my team and like tell me that, that I can do this.
Can we go back actually? And for those who haven't seen the show yet, just kind of recap quickly My Heart Goes Zoom, what it is about.
Exactly. So My Heart Goes Zoom is a genuine true story about my documentary film theory class that was transferred from in person to online in Zoom. And so it's a 3-day class, and it is about the genuine crush I developed on a man I do not know over Zoom and his small Zoom square. And so it's a real time experience of navigating, meeting someone, not just online, not on Tinder, right? Not on OkCupid, but in a shared Zoom platform with a full screen of human beings, and navigating, is this a real thing? Can this be a real thing? How do I make this a real thing? How do I make this a thing despite the fact that I cannot even go meet him in person? Should I get through all the barriers that I'm provided in the landscape that we currently live in? So it's a genuinely true story about meeting this man on a Zoom platform and how I navigated and navigate this romantic experience. Do you think that sums it up?
Yeah. I think that was great. So at which point did you decide that you want to perform your story?
As I was figuring out how to take action on my crush, which was not something I planned to do, but I was like, well, I have to now. I have to do this. I was like, well, even better that I write about it, because this is such an in the now experience that it's happening like real time. So the first performance we did of it, the audience literally helped me craft my next move.
Did they help?
Yes, they totally helped. And the main thing that was so wonderful about it was that they just wanted me to succeed, to do this thing. And I think that that's sort of what's been really special about creating these spaces, is finding common ground with people across all the wavelengths we're living in, and getting to a place where it's like, hey, I am an insecure, anxious, often neurotic person, and I'm living in this lonely world, and I met someone that I think is really exciting in this Zoom platform, and like, what should I do about it? And when I'm coming at them with that kind of crazy, chaotic energy, they're like, hey, fucking good for you. Sorry for my language, but they're like, yeah. And maybe there's a little bit of like, well, could you meet someone on Zoom? And could that be something we navigate? So if I can do it, then you could do it. And so like, let's do it. And I think that there's a part of that sort of joyful actually nature in the work that is really valuable, because finding and accessing joy can be a struggle right now. And I want to access vulnerability, because that's the space that I live in, and how I think my meaningful relationships with audience who become friends, right? So we actually don't even close the Zoom room anymore. Like when the performance ends, people trail off, but I kind of come back. I cover my screen, Danessa talks, I come back. And we've had these things go on for hours with people that I've never met in person, because we get to know each other after a while, and they come back and they respond to prompts and tell personal things. And I continue to share my romantic experiences as well as just my personal struggles. So we kind of get to know each other through this space. And there is a little bit of joy in that genuine connection that I think is valuable, and that I think that's the place that I think that's the value in art, is that we can have vulnerability and we can have human contact, and we can even do it. It's not, the magic of the bathroom for me is it's irreplaceable. But what are other ways that we can explore vulnerability and intimacy? How do we do that? And for me, I do that by putting all my stuff on the line and being like, this may be a lot for you, and maybe you don't like that, and that's okay. You can just cry. You can just X out of my box. And I'll just chalk it up to, interference. But maybe if you're like, wow, she's put all her stuff out there, even while just speaking into a camera, then maybe you can do that too. And that then we've got some common ground, and that suddenly we are together. And for My Heart Goes Zoom, it's like, okay, she's trying to do this very difficult thing, which is not swiping right. It is a stranger in a room, in a screen full of strangers. And I think that there's some real intimacy and vulnerability in talking about that. And then there's some real, like you said, joy and fun in the community experience of exploring those feelings.
I wonder if anybody like takes My Heart Goes Zoom into like their own practice, and because I remember at least one woman admitted that she was hitting on people during your show in the chat.
One of my friends who's at the show is like, I'm totally gonna steal what you did for when I get a Zoom crush. Like, for when I get a Zoom crush, which inevitably I'm gonna get.
Yeah, I feel like it's contagious, and people like started recognizing that as a viable option, and a way to like connect and hook up romantically.
And I think that the crush in the time of COVID is an act of resilience. It is saying, like, I am not going to let this cripple me into fear and isolation. I am still going to connect with a human being. I am still going to like try to find some joy and some hope. And if you are an anxious, shy, maybe neurotic person, insecure, have depression, and all of those things, if you have any of those things like me, then to overcome that, just the thought of overcoming that is an act of resilience, right? To say, like, all right, all of this stuff is coming down on me, and I'm still going to hit on a stranger over Zoom, which I didn't want to do. I was so scared, but I just knew that I had to. And I had to because I had to prove to myself that this thing, however long it goes, isn't going to stop me from being my true self, which is someone who overcomes some obstacles, and an obstacle right now for artists and, muggles, as we might say, is just like, how do we connect? How do we connect? How do we connect creatively? How do we connect romantically? How do we connect organically and intimately? And we're all exploring the different ways to do that. And for me, it's like, all right, I'm going to put all my shit on the line. And that's really, really scary, but that's the only way I know how to do it.
If you haven't already, go check the schedule of Please Don't Touch the Artist shows. There are 4 or 5 of them on the website, and Siobhan and her team constantly come up with something new. Although I can't see my audience, I really appreciate you watching this video. Make sure to subscribe if you want to stay on top of cool immersive things that are happening right now. And if you have any thoughts, suggestions, feelings, feel free to comment below. I can also be found on social media, on Instagram and Facebook at Asya Gorovets. Remember that social distancing doesn't mean shutting yourself down. Go text or call your friend, or maybe meet somebody entirely new on that Zoom event that you're attending.